Hi, welcome to this part of my review featuring the Fading Suns universe book. If you haven't seen the other parts of this review, featuring the setting book for the science fiction passion play experience that is the Fading Suns role-playing game, please check out the playlist in the description below. This time we're going to continue with the history of the setting. Let's start with the first contact, the Chanter. Amid the territorial struggles of the diaspora, humanity encountered its first sentient species. The Chanter of Shaprut were an equine-like species who had achieved a degree of civilization despite their limited tool-using capabilities. While encounters with the Chanter were humanity's first publicly acknowledged first contact, obscure records imply that contact with the reptilian Hieronym preceded the Chanter. News of the discovery was censored. The Chanter, living on the vast grass plains of Shaprut, celebrated a culture that valued strong family ties and romantic relationships, although this also enforced a fierce tribalism that often led to conflicts with other tribes. Indeed, clan warfare was common, and good soldiers were the most honored members of a tribe. However, no soldier was long respected if he did not revere his family or play out the elaborate rites of courtship with his spouse. The Chanter also practiced a religion akin to sun worship, but their world was rich in minerals, and their indigenous cultures stood in the way of extraction. In the diaspora, interplanetary supremacy depended on resources. The feeling of the Shaprut colonists was that if they did not take the bounty, someone else would. In addition, the Chanter could not communicate with humans without technical assistance, such as computer voice boxes. All too often, they were viewed as little more than smart animals. For these reasons, most humans did not feel responsible for displacing the Chanter. They even saw themselves as a necessary civilizing influence on the horse-like race, providing them with jobs in the mines, although often with grueling, laborious tasks. Many Chanter revolted. Those who lived on the plains led assaults on colony mining operations. The large and clever Chanter are dangerous when riled, and the loss of life and property they caused summoned the wrath of the colony leaders. Armies descended onto Shaprut to put the unruly rebels down. A guerrilla was ensued, but the result was never in question. The broken Chanter rebels were herded up and shipped off-world, scattered onto reservations throughout human space, sometimes onto worlds hostile to their way of life. Families were separated, their members never to see each other again. The great shame of humanity's first contact has haunted many humans for centuries. The Prophet was only beginning his questing as the Chanter's culture was dismantled, but he spoke out against the tragedy. However, he had too few followers then, and no power to change the course of history, not yet. By 1519, restitution has not yet been made to the Chanter, although Emperor Alexius granted land to them on the world of Hargard. Certain people believe that if the Prophet had not died such an untimely death in Vow space, the fate of the Chanter and other sentients to follow them might have been different. Thus, the fate of most sentient races encountered by humanity followed that of the Chanter. Regardless of their tenacity and degree of technology, they soon came under human rule. While some live in peaceful coexistence with humans, such as the Ovun, Voroks, and Ganok, others resisted human encroachment bitterly. Let's talk about the Vow. A newly discovered jump gate delivered humanity onto a small but lush world they called New Monaco, now called Apshai. It was the home of the Gnesh, a quiet insectoid alien race who spent most of their time making elaborate and beautiful plant and tree sculptures linked by organic webbing. They ignored the new colonists at first, but when the colonists forced some Ganesh from their gardens and claimed the land for themselves, the Ganesh became quite indignant. All they would say was, "It is not allowed. Please leave." Of course, the colonists scoffed. These weak gardeners offered no threat to them, but their patrons did. A massive starship appeared through the jump gate, a ship whose like had never been seen before, Harnessing a great ball of raging plasma energy, this dreadnought destroyed the human fleet placed around New Monaco. Small ships disengaged from its hull and went hurtling to the planet below, dropping off vicious cargo, Vow soldiers. These soldiers systematically began wiping out all the human colonists encountered. The minor house officials in charge of the planet desperately tried to surrender before greater and technologically superior forces, but their cries went unheeded. The Vow killed everyone. Afterwards, they boarded their ships and left. The Ganesh went back to gardening. The only thing the Vow left behind was a message: leave this planet alone. It is the property of the Vow hegemony. Do not follow the jump roads from this gate further. Of course, humanity did go further, seeking retribution for their loss. What they found were more Vow worlds, worlds of vastly superior technology. Few returned to tell the tale. Those that did were allowed to return. Finally, the Vow accepted a human diplomat, Benjamin Verden of House Justinian. Benjamin returned from his first sojourn overwhelmed by the superiority of the Vow. He was thankful for one thing he had become convinced of on his trip. The Vow were non-expansionist. Their inherently political structure sought and upheld stability over all other virtues. Their empire and their way of life had changed little in the past few centuries, following the dictates of their first space emperor. Benjamin discovered that the Ganesh were a conquered species. The Vow dealt with their subjects in very different ways than humans. The Ganesh put a valiant fight against the invading Vow. Upon surrender, the general of the Ganesh, having learned Vow culture well, demanded the Vow give him face before he could stop the war. This is an important concept to the Vow. Honor and dignity come before life itself. For the general to willingly suffer such a shame as defeat, the Vow also had to sacrifice something. They gave the Ganesh long life and peace in return for submission. In other words, the Ganesh live under a socialized retirement granted by their conquerors, all because their general had understood the Vow social system. This insight was to help humanity well in dealing with the Vow in centuries to come. But for now, the Vow made it clear that they had no interest in the pollutant that was humanity. Relations were distant and informal for centuries. The encounter with the Vow bolstered the power of the Church, especially after the death of the Prophet in the jump gate accident in Vow space. Convenient. Humanity trembled before the threat of a technologically superior, though non-expansionist, alien species. Palamides' church drew them together and bolstered their confidence. Humanity was, after all, chosen for the stars. That was its destiny. To turn back now would be to fail the Pancreator. The urgings of the priests gave humanity a unifying creed, a universal doctrine of excellence with which to move forward in the face of defeat. It is ironic that it was the church that gave humans the prod to reach so high, the same church who centuries later would admonish them for such a sin. Now let's talk about the Ukar War. The Ukar had struggled through centuries of internal conflict on their hostile and subterranean world of Kordeth before finally reaching the stars. They colonized 3 planets near their system: Ostar, now a lost world; Okshka, later called Ilon; and Cradle, later called Istakhr. They were ready to expand still further when they encountered humans on Criticorum. It was hate at first sight. The vain Ukari saw a world for conquering and a race to enthrall. They attacked with little warnings and took the main capital on Criticorum. Human response was swift. Noble families on Shaprut and New Istanbul formed a fleet to retake the planet. A long and bitter war ensued, taking place on almost every planet and moon in the system. Their revolt spread as Ukari slipped into other planets and began guerrilla assaults. Soon, humans on nearly a dozen worlds had suffered from the aliens. The Ur-Ovun, who had been encountered soon after the Chanter, quickly recognized their ancient brethren and spoke out against them, joining the humans in condemnation of the Ukari tactics. Then an Ukar on Shaprut used his psychic powers to force the Chanter to revolt. The Chanter broke from their reservation and stormed across the villages and towns that sat on the Chanter's once open plains. The retribution was fierce and decisive. Nearly a quarter of the Chanter were killed before the remainder surrendered. Psychic powers had developed strongly in humanity after the first sojourn through the Jump Gate, and the practice slowly grew. New powers were developed as the years and generations passed. With the suppression of Sathraism, the advent of new psychic powers slowed. The Ukari were advanced psychics from birth, but they had little compunction governing the use of their powers. When they employed their mind tricks against the Chanter, humans began to fear them and no longer sought a peaceful end to the Criticorum conflict. Humanity could not rest until these mind controllers were in chains. Patriarch Palamedes used these assaults to preach against alien dangers and the need for humans to unite. The words of the prophet seemed eerily designed for such effect, especially their talk of demons and evil among the stars. The presence of an Ur-Ovun among the disciples was conveniently overlooked. New converts to the church grew every day, especially after each Ukar terrorist maneuver. Using information gathered from some unknown source, Palamedes sent the fleet to the Ukari homeworld of Kordeth, whose location had been previously unknown. Spiraling out of the Jump Gate, the fleet split up and began hitting any ship they came across. On the planet below, panic broke out and all Ukari clan rivalries ignited. Kept in check by the powerful overlord and his expansionist campaign, enemies of the ruling family rose up and sabotaged planetary defenses. Pilots loyal to the minor clans heeded the calls and broke off from the phalanx, leaving the planet defenseless against the assault. The fleet sent in a landing party to seize the surface capital, home of the Overlord. The Overlord surrendered while his rivals hid in the caverns below, knowing that they would inherit the planet once the humans had gone. Their plan did not go as well as they would have hoped. The humans did not live, but only came in greater numbers until all Ukari resistance was squashed. Nobles and merchant leaders of numerous worlds came to ensure that the Ukari would not rise again. In the later times of the Second Republic, the Ukari would sue for greater freedom from the domination they suffered for their mistaken acts, and they would be given such freedom, but for now, they were a kept people. Palamedes' victory ensured the safety of human space, or so the church preached. The bold event was trumpeted to people on worlds far from Kordeth, who had suffered little from the war, but still had an effect. Now, when it comes to drawing order from this chaos, new technology progressed quickly, as scientists made amazing discoveries by observing phenomena on other worlds, as well as by taking lore from alien species and occasionally sharing it. Incredible advances were made, but they were not spread equally among the commonwealth of humanity. As some worlds prospered, most often those with strong hereditary leadership, the nobles, they subsumed others under them, and soon many star-faring interplanetary governments flourished. The heart of all these operations, however, was commerce. Some planets had certain resources in abundance, while lacking others. Trade was necessary for the betterment of life everywhere. The greedy, overarching attitude of the Saivatsu and the new royalty could not long maintain a foothold in the new sprawl of worlds, where another choice always existed. It is again ironic that it was the Church's teachings of a humane and ethical philosophy that gave rise to an institution that would eventually eclipse the Church's role. Indeed, under the Republic, humanity's yearning for spiritual answers was drowned by the array of material comfort and sensual stimuli available to every citizen. So, let's talk about the Second Republic. Some ancient human thinkers once put forth that liberal democracies were the ultimate progression of government. According to them, after such a form of governing becomes universal, no further progress is possible. Humanity reached its pinnacle in the form of the Second Republic, a time of quick progress and amazing changes. The standard of living for the average citizen was raised on all worlds. During this time, technology knew no limits. It was a time of genetic engineering, curing many diseases and deformities, but often leading to creation of freakish, near-human species. It was a time when terraforming was all the rage, when almost every world in human space was fixed to be more Earth-like, making better homes for humanity, despite wiping out many native ecosystems in the process, along with the natural habitats of many alien species. This was a time when the threat of physical danger was a myth and accidental death a nearly forgotten idea. Sports of extreme danger were practiced readily, since a personal energy shield or medpack with the elixir wonder drug was always around to protect or revive the victim of even fatal accidents. The citizenry soon forgot the traumas and triumphs that had forged their way of life. The bubble soon burst from within. The Republic had grown too far and too fast in technological mastery. Many of its wonders were introduced with no consideration for their effect on the wider populace, as most technology displaced workers, and soon there was no need for work. But the economy did not keep up with these changes, and people still needed money to live. But where to get it? The welfare system of the Republic was grand, but it was not built to uphold the sheer number of citizens displaced from their livelihoods by technology or cheap alien labor. As this reality was sinking in, unknown terrorists managed to sabotage the central think machine data lattice that controlled the welfare information. Anarchy ensued. It was now a time of divestiture and darkness. The nobility of many worlds, weak but still extant, saw their chance. They began orchestrating deals with the overextended Central Republic government for more local power to crush riots in return for increased tax revenues, all the while refusing to pay out welfare money. This began a period historians later termed divestiture, for as the Republic ceded out power, it lost more and more control over the bureaucratic beast the government had become. Finally, massive corruption in the central government, along with the increased tax burden, caused outlying worlds to secede. These rogue worlds, typically under the power of noble families, were too powerful to put down. Then the stars began to darken. Only after 3 suns with populated planets noticeably dimmed did people begin to realize that the fading suns phenomenon was not going away. But what was causing it? The Universal Church began to preach, explaining why the suns were fading. Humans were sinful and had, in their pride, overreached, claiming the powers of the Pancreator for themselves. The Pancreator chose to take their power from them by taking the very light of the worlds away. This message hit the right nerves, and a vicious millennialism was born. People needed reasons to hate and a target to direct it toward. The Church effectively took humanity's discontent and directed it at the Republic, the source of the Church's own problems. In an attempt to recapture support, the Republican president made a deal with the Orthodox sect of the Church. In return for the Church's open acceptance of the Republic's secular authority, the Republic would declare Orthodoxy the official and only recognized sect of the Church. This ignited religious wars and breakaway sects. During this time, the legendary Saint Rasmussen spoke his famous lament, "Oh, that my head were water, and mine eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for lost humanity. Tremble ye, sinners, for the long night is upon us, and the suns themselves are seen to fade. Repent and know salvation, repent or die." The nadir of this conflict came when certain rogue worlds, acting with the support of alien species, arrived through the Byzantium Secundus's jump gate to seize control of the government. This surprise assault took the Republic off guard, and Byzantium fell to the rebels. As word spread to the worlds of the Republic, utter chaos ensued. The major noble houses knew their chance had come at last. All they had worked towards over the years had finally come to fruition. 10 houses banded together and sent a fleet to retake Byzantium Secundus. With their now vast military might, gathered through the years of divestiture, they retook the capital with little resistance. As the smoke in the presidential palace cleared, the 10 houses raised their own banner. The fall of the Second Republic was complete. Progress died. History worked its way towards a peak and then reversed itself. Many a person has been lost in the darkness, even while standing in the light. So it was with the citizenry of the Second Republic. The lights were dimmed. The new dark ages had begun. And this concludes this part of the review for today. In the next part, we are going to finish looking through the history of the setting, going through the new dark ages and the rise of Emperor Alexius. As you can see, it's a very exciting tale or recount of events that are quite cyclical, always in search of expansion and progress, but oftentimes the government ends up shooting itself in the foot. So let's see how things develop from here. Thank you for watching this part of the review, and thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you and see you later.